Still living in that cramped apartment? My uncle laughed. Later that night, my cousin toasted to the startup he built from the ground up. He didn't realize I had every download timestamp and the text message admitting the theft. I let the room celebrate before I handed my uncle the police report for wire fraud. The look on my cousin's face when the Cross family had a clear idea of what success looked like. You wore a suit to work. You had a title with manager or director in it. You drove a car newer than 5 years and talked about it at dinner. You had something visible, something people could point to. What you did not do was spend your savings bootstrapping a software company out of a one-bedroom apartment in Austin, Texas, staring at code until 2 in the morning, trying to explain to your relatives what a SaaS platform was, and watching their eyes glaze over before you finished the sentence. That was what I did. I had gotten a full scholarship out of high school, first in the family to go to university on a full ride. My parents were proud, briefly. Then I graduated, turned down a corporate offer, and moved into that apartment. $1,100 a month, a desk, a whiteboard, and a laptop that ran hot. I was building a B2B workflow automation platform, the kind of software that, once it worked, would change how mid-sized companies managed their internal operations. It was the only thing I had wanted to build for years. The family stopped asking about my work around year 2. By year 3, they had filed the whole thing under nerd work and moved on. It was not malice, exactly. They just could not see what I was building. That was their first mistake. Brett Cross was the opposite of me in every way the family understood. He had gone to a decent school on family support, landed a corporate job in Chicago, and wore it well. The suits, the salary, the right words said at the right dinners. He had an ease around people that I had never had, and he knew how to use it. The family looked at Brett and saw what they believed success was supposed to look like. We were close once, or I thought we were. In the spring of the year before all of this, Brett visited me twice in Austin. He said he was curious about what I was working on. I believed him. On the second visit, I was mid-session at the whiteboard, the full architecture of my platform laid out in black marker. Every component labeled, every data flow mapped, every API connection and integration point documented across the board. Brett stood in front of it for a while. "Mind if I take a photo?" he said. "I want to show Claire." I told him to go ahead. He took the picture, smiled, and put his phone in his pocket. He asked a few general questions after that. Nothing deep, nothing technical. He did not ask a single follow-up question during the rest of the visit. He never needed to. About 14 months after that second visit, I was scrolling LinkedIn on a Tuesday morning when I saw it. Brett had launched a startup, NovaBridge, a groundbreaking B2B workflow automation platform. He had tagged 3 co-founders and linked to a landing page. The post already had over 200 likes. I clicked through. The product description was lifted almost word for word from my early investor deck. The problem statement was mine. The solution framing was mine. The UX screenshots showed an interface built on the same architectural logic I had diagrammed on that whiteboard. The features Brett's team was calling proprietary innovations were things I had built, tested, and documented 18 months earlier. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I opened my GitHub repository. My first commit on the core platform technology. September 3rd, 14 months before Brett's public launch date. I went to my Google Drive. I pulled up the admin access log for the technical folder, the one I had briefly given Brett view access to during one of his visits, so he could look at a single reference document. That access was meant to be temporary. I had not revoked it immediately. That oversight would become important. The log told a different story than I had expected. Brett's personal Gmail address had accessed that folder 11 times over a 3-week period. The timestamps, 11:17 p.m., 12:02 a.m., 1:48 a.m., all after midnight, all with bulk download events attached. The files he had pulled: Platform v2, Architecture, Final, PDF, API Structure, v3, Doc.x, Investor Deck, Confidential, PPTX. He had not glanced at one document. He had taken everything, every version, every file, every piece of proprietary documentation I had built over 2 years in that apartment. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a while. Then I called an IP attorney. She was thorough. Within a week, she had pulled the USPTO provisional patent database. Brett Cross and NovaBridge LLC had filed a provisional patent 7 months earlier. The application covered a set of algorithms and system architecture that matched, in material detail, the core technology underlying my platform. My attorney flagged the overlap on the first pass. My GitHub commit history showed that same technology first committed on September 3rd, 14 months before Brett's patent filing date of November 14th. She explained the window. A provisional patent gives the filer 12 months to submit a full application. Brett was 7 months in. Every week he operated unchallenged. His position on paper solidified. I asked her where we stood. She said, "Your timestamps predate his filing by over a year. That is not a gray area." I told her there was one more thing. A photo I had found while pulling old files. Brett, in my apartment, in front of the whiteboard, during his second visit. She said, "Send it immediately." The photo had been sitting in my camera roll for over a year. I had almost forgotten it existed. Brett was centered in the frame, smiling directly at the camera. Behind him, the whiteboard filled the background edge to edge my full system architecture, every component labeled, every data flow drawn, every integration point documented in black marker. You could read the whiteboard. All of it. The timestamp put it squarely in the spring before NovaBridge's launch. There was Brett, standing in my apartment, grinning in front of the blueprint for a company he would later describe as something he had built from scratch. I sent it to my attorney. She called back within the hour. "This photo places him in your space, in front of your architecture, with a timestamp that predates his patent filing," she said. "Combined with the access logs and the technology overlap, you have the foundation of a clean IP theft case." She told me, "No contact with Brett, nothing on social media, no sign that I knew anything at all. The moment he learns you are building a case," she said, "evidence starts disappearing." So I went back to work on my own platform. I said nothing. 6 weeks before the Lake House gathering, Brett announced his Series A, $3.2 million. The press release went out on a Thursday. By Friday, NovaBridge was in TechCrunch. There was a quote from Brett about years of hard work and building something he believed in from the ground up. That Sunday, my aunt hosted a family dinner. I went. I don't entirely know why. Uncle Ray gave a toast. He stood at the head of the table and talked about what real entrepreneurship looked like, how some people spend their lives dreaming and some people actually go out and build. He did not look at me when he said it. Brett's parents were beaming. Brett shook hands and accepted hugs and talked about the team he had assembled, the problem he had identified, the technology he had developed. The phrase he used, "built from the ground up," word for word from my investor deck, the same document that had been downloaded at 12:02 a.m. 14 months ago. As I was putting on my jacket to leave, Brett caught my arm near the door. "Hey," he said quietly. "I just want you to know I was inspired by a lot of our conversations. You know that, right? That's just how ideas work." He smiled like he was doing me a favor. "Sure, Brett," I said, and walked to my car. I called my attorney the next morning and told her I was ready to move. She told me to slow down. "I understand what you want to do," she said. "But if you confront Brett before we file, he destroys what he can and muddies what he cannot. The temporary restraining order on his patent application has to be filed at the same moment as the civil complaint. If the sequence is wrong, we hand him time to build a response." I asked how long. 3 weeks, she said. "Use the time. Get every exhibit organized. When we file, I want everything ready." The Lake House gathering was in exactly 3 weeks. I did not need to check the calendar. I thought about what those 3 weeks meant. Brett fielding congratulations. Brett in investor meetings, his story hardening into something on the public record. The gap between what was true and what was documented in his favor narrowing a little more every day. But she was right. I had documented every exhibit, built the timeline, and waited this long. I was not going to blow it on an impulsive confrontation. 3 weeks, I said. I spent that evening starting to build the folder. 3 weeks felt like a year. But I had waited this long. I did not expect Claire to reach out. It came as a direct message, 2 weeks before the gathering. Just her name in one line. "I need to talk to you about Brett. I can't stay quiet about this." I called her within 10 minutes. She sounded composed, but barely. She said she had been sitting on this for months. She had told Brett more than once to come clean about where the technology had come from. He had brushed her off every time. She had convinced herself things would resolve somehow. And then the Series A happened, and his name appeared in articles alongside words like visionary and founder, and she just could not stay quiet anymore. She sent me 2 things. The first was a screenshot, a text thread between Brett and his co-founder Marcus, dated 4 days after Brett's second visit to my apartment. Brett's message read, I basically just rebuilt Adam's thing. He'll never figure it out. He's always worried about burn rate. Laugh my ass off. I read that sentence 3 times. The second was an email. Brett had sent it internally to all 4 NovaBridge co-founders about 2 weeks after that text. Subject line: Internal R&D confidential. The attachments were my files, my proprietary architecture guides, my technical documentation redistributed as NovaBridge's own internal research materials. My original file headers were still visible. My name was still in the document metadata. I forwarded both to my attorney immediately. She called back 15 minutes later. The text proves intent, she said. The email proves operation. This is a clean case. Adam, one of the most straightforward IP theft situations I have seen in 10 years. I thanked Claire. She said she hoped it helped. That week, I assembled the folder, not a digital folder. A physical one, a standard manila folder, printed pages, organized in sequence, with an attorney-signed cover sheet dated that morning. Exhibit A. The Google Drive access log. 11 sessions. Brett's Gmail address. Timestamps between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Bulk download events on every session. File names listed and highlighted. Exhibit B. My GitHub commit history. Core platform technology. First committed September 3rd, 14 months before Brett's patent filing date. Exhibit C. The USPTO provisional patent application filed by Brett Cross and NovaBridge LLC on November 14th. Technical description highlighted. Overlap with my documented architecture, annotated in the margins. Exhibit D. The whiteboard photo. Brett centered in the frame. The full system architecture legible behind him. Timestamp from his second apartment visit. Exhibit E. Claire's screenshot. Brett's exact words to Marcus, dated and timestamped. Exhibit F. The internal NovaBridge email. My files, redistributed under a new cover. My original headers, still visible. 6 exhibits. 41 printed pages. My attorney had reviewed every one of them. She had not found a weak link. This is one of the cleanest cases I've handled in 10 years, she had said. I closed the folder and set it on my desk. That evening, Uncle Ray called to confirm I was coming to the lake house gathering. Of course, I said. Wouldn't miss it. He said Brett had some exciting news he wanted to share with the family. I told him I was looking forward to hearing it. My attorney filed the civil complaint on a Monday 9 days before the lake house gathering. Federal Court. Western District of Texas. The complaint listed misappropriation of trade secrets, IP theft, and fraudulent patent application filed under the Defend Trade Secrets Act. Alongside it, she filed for a temporary restraining order against NovaBridge's pending full patent application. If granted, Brett's window would freeze. She also began quietly notifying Brett's Series B investors not an accusation, just a disclosure. An active federal IP dispute had been filed involving NovaBridge's core technology. Any investor with standard due diligence procedures would need to know. The complaint was filed under seal. Brett would not be formally served for 10 days. For 9 days, he did not know. He was out there scheduling meetings, talking to investors, preparing whatever announcement he was planning to deliver to the family at the lake house. A federal complaint was sitting in a courthouse with his name at the top. Brett's Series B was already starting to smell like smoke. 4 days before the gathering, my bank's fraud department called. An unauthorized access attempt had been made on my business account. The attempt had been blocked, the origin IP traced to a device registered under Marcus's name, Brett's co-founder. I sat very still when the representative finished explaining. My attorney had a term for it. Wire fraud. Attempted unauthorized access to financial accounts. A federal crime, separate from the IP case. She filed a police report that afternoon and added the bank's documentation to the complaint as a supplemental exhibit. I thought about what it meant for a long time after that call. Brett had not just stolen my technology and moved on. He was still watching me, still checking my accounts, trying to determine my financial runway, how long I could sustain a legal fight before I ran dry and walked away. He was not simply an opportunist who had spotted an opening. He was watching to see when I would run out of money to fight back. My attorney called the evening before I drove up to the lake house. Don't go, she said. Let the process work. You've already filed. The case is solid. You don't need to be in that room. I heard her. I understood exactly what she was saying. But the court would handle the filing. It would not sit at that table. It would not hear Uncle Ray's joke land the same way it always had. It would not watch Brett stand up in front of every person who had ever written me off and give a toast about a company built on something he had stolen from me. I had done everything right. I had followed every step she gave me, filed correctly, documented every exhibit, waded through the dinners and the press hits and the congratulations. The case was airtight, and I had one folder. I drove 4 hours. The folder was on the passenger seat. I pulled into the lake house driveway as the sun was going down and sat in the car for a moment. After tonight, there is no version of this family where I am the punchline anymore. I got out of the car. Uncle Ray got me at the door. Still living in that cramped apartment, Adam? I smiled. For now, I said, and walked past him to find a spot on the porch. By 8 o'clock, dinner was cleared and the gathering had settled into the part of the evening where conversation slowed and people refilled their drinks. Brett's parents were moving around the table. Someone had brought out a cake for no particular reason. Then Brett stood up and tapped his beer bottle with a fork. He waited for the conversations to go quiet. He looked completely at ease, the kind of ease that comes from years of being the person a room waits for. He talked about the journey, the early mornings and the hard decisions, the investors who had believed in him before anyone else did. He talked about the team he had assembled and the technology they had developed together. He talked about NovaBridge's upcoming Series B 8 figures, weeks from closing. I built this from the ground up, he said. Every piece of it. The family applauded. Uncle Ray stood up and hugged him. Someone in the back whistled. Built from the ground up. My phrase. My investor deck. My words, in his mouth, in front of my entire family. I picked up the folder and stood. I'd like to add something to that toast, I said. The porch went quiet. People turned. Brett looked over. I walked to a position where I could see the full table, and I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. Brett, I said, I want to walk everyone through a few things. I started with the drive logs. I held up the printed page. Brett's personal Gmail address. 11 access sessions to my confidential technical folder, every session between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., bulk downloads on everyone. I named the files out loud. Platform V2, Architecture, Final, API Structure, V3. Investor Deck, Confidential. I moved to the GitHub timestamps. My core platform technology, committed September 3rd, 14 months before Brett's provisional patent filing date of November 14th. 14 months, I said. I let that sit. I placed the whiteboard photo on the table and slid it toward the center so people could reach it. That's Brett, I said. In my cramped apartment. In front of everything he later filed a patent on. Brett's mother reached over and picked up the photo. I placed Claire's screenshot beside it. His own fiancée sent me this, I said. I read the text message out loud, the one Brett had sent to Marcus 4 days after his second visit to my apartment. I basically just rebuilt Adam's thing. He'll never figure it out. He's always worried about burn rate. Then I set the bank alert on the table. No comment, Brett said. This is insane. The timestamps disagree, I said. He looked around the table at his parents, at Uncle Ray, at the printed pages passing from hand to hand. Adam. His voice dropped. You've always been paranoid about people stealing from you. This is the same thing. You're doing what you always do. From the far end of the table, Claire said. Stop. One word. Quiet, but final. Everyone looked at her. She was sitting very still, both hands flat on the table. She looked at Brett for a long moment. Then she looked at the room. I sent Adam those screenshots, she said. I watched Brett distribute Adam's documentation to his co-founders. I told Brett to come clean about where the technology came from. I told him more than once. A pause. He said it wasn't a big deal. Nobody moved. I said, quietly, the access attempt on my business account is also in the federal complaint. The IP trace connects to Marcus's device. That's wire fraud. It's a separate count from the IP theft claim. I placed the bank alert on the table and left it there. Brett stood up. He looked at Claire. He started to say something and stopped. He walked inside without another word. His mother set the whiteboard photo down. Uncle Ray was staring at the drive log printout. The man who had made the cramped apartment joke an hour ago had nothing left to say. Claire stayed at the table. She did not follow Brett. She did not look at anyone in particular. She just stayed. I closed the folder. Down on the dock, a few of the younger cousins were still laughing about something, completely unaware. Up on the porch, no one spoke. No one moved. I had not raised my voice once. I had not needed to. NovaBridge's Series B collapsed within 2 weeks of the federal complaint becoming public record. 3 investors withdrew. 2 of them issued written statements citing the active IP dispute. Brett's provisional patent was invalidated by the USPTO. 4 months later, the timestamp gap was not ambiguous, and my legal team's submission to the patent office was thorough. The restraining order held until the case reached resolution. The company folded 6 months after the Lake House gathering. Brett and Claire ended their engagement sometime in the fall. I heard about it through a family text thread. I did not ask for details. Uncle Ray never apologized. I had not expected him to. Men like Uncle Ray do not apologize, they just stop making certain jokes. The Cramped apartment stopped coming up at family events. The comments about nerd work quietly disappeared. I noticed the absence. I did not need it to feel like a victory. It was just the shape of things after. My father called the week after the gathering. He said, "I didn't know." "I know, Dad," I said. That was enough. 4 months after the Lake House, my platform closed its own Series B funding round. $14 million. The announcement went out on a Thursday morning, and it landed in outlets that mattered more to me than TechCrunch. I moved out of the Cramped apartment that same month. Not to make a statement, not to prove anything to anyone still paying attention. Just because it was time, and I could, and the next chapter needed more space than $1,100 a month could hold. The nerd work, as it turned out, had worked out just fine.